Welcome to lunch, everybody. You've made it halfway through. Congratulations. I hope everybody's enjoying their Atwater's box lunch. Yum. So my name is Jeff Bloom. I'm the founder of Murphy & Root Malting Company in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm also a board member with Common Grain Alliance, serving as treasurer. So if you guys get membership renewal updates, that's me. I'm sorry in advance. But just a quick personal introduction. Again, I'm founder of Murphy & Root Malting in Charlottesville. We're a relatively small, about 320 metric ton a year malt house, serving the brewing and distilling industries. We are the first and only commercial dedicated malt house in Virginia. I don't know if that is because I'm crazy or if I'm not. So I thank you all those growers out there, all of the producers, all of the folks that believe in locally grown small grains. I think we're all making a difference here, and the attendance here is, I think, a testament to that. So I would love to introduce Nazirahk. Nazirahk Amin is a naturopathic doctor, Chinese medicine practitioner, para-urban farmer, and entrepreneur. As a natural health practitioner, Nazirahk practices the Hippocratic view of food as a medicine. He has been practicing for 24 years at Wisdom Path Healing Center in Tacoma Park, Maryland. He is the owner and operator of Purple Mountain Organics, which offers quality tools, organic farm supplies, and custom farming services. The Purple Mountain grown a peri-urban farming operation that specializes in small grains and dry beans at local farmers markets. Oh.
Thank you. All right, can you hear me? All right. So I'm Nazirahk. Peace, everyone. I'm glad you're all here. I come to you today, and I kind of got my start here through UDC into actual farming. Wendell Berry said back in the 70s, colleges of agriculture have become colleges of agribusiness. And so I guess the beauty of UDC is that at their small farm in Beltsville, Maryland, they did not have the chance to get corrupted in such a way. And so it's been we were able to build up a business through them and be who we are at this point. So the farming side of who we are started through UDC. So a couple people earlier, kind of talked about what's happening here, and I want to bring the growing of food and the consequences that it's had on our health together today, because I think that it's definitely underestimated by farmers as well as by the medical community, or I should say the medical industry, because they're both. I think there's agribusiness and there's the medical industry. Someone from Pennsylvania said that she felt like she's in the South now, and that's pretty true. I read David Montgomery's book, I think it was in Dirt, where he talked about basically how the types of agriculture that were started in different states. And pretty much here in Maryland versus Virginia, slave-owning states were the original, their extractionary practices have always been the case. They pretty much used up the land and moved west. In Pennsylvania, you have people like the Amish and Mennonites, and just a tradition of people who cared more about the soil and wanted to work with it in a deeper way. And so, but we need to understand, what's been going on has really always gone on. I think the extractionary attitude towards the world, meaning us versus nature, has been a part of definitely like European, a European worldview of us sort of against nature. And so in the mid 1800s, you know, you see the beginning of large scale agriculture with farm as a factory. And what I mean by that is small farms, because of course there was slavery in these large plantations that depended on human labor. This is a movement towards smaller farms run by fewer people, which was basically facilitated by large-scale production, specialized machines, the standardization of processes and products, a reliance. We moved away from a reliance on artisanal skills into more managerial skills to run farms, and efficiency has been the most important thing. And so I mention this because, you know, I talked to a couple people even today, and, you know, we're at this crossroads, even what was just mentioned, like we're all here taking risk, right? We're growing grains in a system of commodity cropping that doesn't recognize small grain growers. And so I think the risk is you know, necessary because food is medicine, and it's something that we definitely need to, it's a step that needs to be taken. You know, as I'll lay out today, what we've done with grain is just turn it into starch, right? And so this is how we look at, you know, Wonder Bread or white rice. We've just kind of degenerated into starch as a component of food. And, you know, at the turn of the 19th century, we had all these diseases like pellagra and beriberi and all types of diseases that were related to nutrient deficiencies that came from the demineralization of our soils and the way that we processed our foods. So, you know, just some stats. Back in 1850, a farm and a horse could produce 100 bushels of corn in 75 hours. A farm and a tractor in 1930 cut that down to 15 hours. Corn production in 1859 was 173 million bushels. In 1900, it was 287 million bushels. Wheat production in 1870, 20 million acres. As people moved west, it turned into 50 million acres. And from 1920 to 1932, 25% of the farms disappeared. From 1950 to 1960, about 50% of farms decreased between that period, so the 10-year period of the 1960s, as the, I guess, the USDA streamlined the process where farmers just got consolidated. So it was get big or get out. And so I think in that process, we definitely sacrifice quality over quantity. So the big kind of demon in the room that allowed this to happen was chemical agriculture, which is us reducing things to NPK. So nitrogen in, I think 1910 was the Haber-Bosch reaction. After the Haber-Bosch reaction, we were able to create, I think, ammonia, or nitrogen derived from ammonia for agricultural uses. And that is basically still driving the agricultural system of today. And I think there's huge consequences of that, not only environmentally, but on people's health. Along at the same time in 1910 in medicine, we had the Flexner report came out. So Flexner was hired by J.P. Morgan. His brother was a physician who worked for Rockefeller. He came out with this report that basically cut out all of naturopathic medicine and every other form of medicine outside of the industrial type medicine that was done at Johns Hopkins, what they call scientific medicine. And so we went from 148 medical schools down to 66. I think, you know, black folk had about 16 medical schools, and as a result of this report, there's only two, one being Howard, the other is Meharry. So there was huge ramifications for people's health. And, you know, there's a lot of beauty to the American healthcare system. I think if you have trauma, it's great. If you have any type of infectious disease, it's great. I think even if you already have some chronic diseases, like if you have a cancer and it can get cut out, that's great, right? But we're not addressing what's actually generating a lot of the disease. So we've ended up with this healthcare system that's about to crash our whole economy. And we're number one in healthcare system in spending. We're number 11 amongst the high-income nations in 2022 in terms of quality of care, and number 37 in terms of quality of care worldwide, according to the World Health Organization in 2000. So chronic diseases are at epidemic proportion. So I just recently read a book called Metabolical, which I highly recommend. Robert Lustig. In it, he said it's not what's in the food, it's what's been done to the food, right? So basically, this ultra-processed, hyper-processed foods are at the basis of a metabolic syndrome that we are not recognizing because there's many facets and many ways that these diseases come about or express themselves. But in the end, it's the processing of food which is really destroying our health. So I got a lot of slides in a little bit of time, so I'm gonna go pretty fast. So this is me. I think that's 1970 something, probably 75 or 6. I'm the one on the right there. So I grew up, I guess, in the shadows of some of what we just talked about. My father, we lived in a small town, Opelousas, Louisiana. In the city, I guess my first memories were, we lived right next door to our grandparents. We had a lot in the back of our house. So, when I say I wasn't a farmer, I don't know if that's true because technically I lived on a homestead in town. We had pigs in the backyard. My grandparents kept chickens. They had a huge garden in the backyard. We had fig trees. We had blackberry bushes. We had 4 or 5 pecan trees. So a lot of the stuff that we ate as kids, we actually, it came in this homestead style. So my father, my cousin, my grandfather came from World War I, and he married my grandmother and moved onto their land, so onto my grandmother's land. So it was my grandmother, her 2 brothers, and one of them's wife. And so my father grew up in a house with 9 other children and 5 adults that was about a 2-bedroom house. So this was on about 40 acres of land, and they couldn't wait to get out of there. So, and their idea of getting out of there was wages and education. So they took wages and they pushed on us education as the road to get out of that situation. And some of my first memories was building the house that we built to move us back out to the country, right? And so to get us away from some of the inner city blight that was happening, and we pretty much grew up in an area where we were considered criminals, where, you were taught pretty early, not even taught, the vibe was just in the air to just not cooperate with the police. And I think that just is part of the, what happened after slavery is they criminalized being black. And I think I grew up in sort of the shadows of that. So but my father, he had this idea of building a house. So my first memories are pulling nails out of lumber. And we built this house, and he used a lot of cypress and a lot of old lumber, recycled lumber. And he built a house that was a barn, but my father was a dirt man, right? He made his living as a machinery operator. And so part of my struggle, and when I came into organic farming, when I moved back to my family, they pretty much ran me off because my brother is a dirt man too. And so between my brother and my father, and in Louisiana, there's like 3 feet of topsoil where I grew up, right? So it's like you go down and you keep going down and it just gets better, right? And so I really value topsoil. So me and my brother really clashed about the value of the land and what was valuable and what was not. And so in the end, I yielded. I was like, you can have it, I'm done. And so I think now they understand what I was trying to do. So I live here in Maryland. I'm a naturopathic doctor. So I went off, I worked as a medic for 4 years in the city of New Orleans. This was back in the 80s during the crack epidemic. So I got to see, so I was always busy. So I was a full-time student. I worked full-time as a medic. And I was a full-time partier. And so the experience that I got during those 4 years working as an EMT for the city of New Orleans with this trauma, it was both the medical side of it and the trauma side of it for me, right? I got to see in many ways how the healthcare system didn't work, and I definitely got to see how it did work. And like I said, if you have trauma, the system we have is great. But there were so many times that we went to the same address for a similar call, whether it was asthma attack, a sickle cell crisis, people just in crisis, and we give them, you go in there, they're having an asthma attack, and there's this glow-in-the-dark kind of pack of cookies sitting on the counter that they had just eaten, and you're like, hey man, you're having another attack. So we are frustrated because they're calling us again. But at no point are we really addressing what's going on there, right? Which is like to really empower someone not to be so dependent on the system. And so I ended up finishing my undergrad, and I found out about a school in Seattle called Bastyr. Bastyr is a 4-year school that specializes in natural medicine. And so I became a naturopathic doctor, and I'm also an acupuncturist. I've been practicing Chinese medicine. My first office was actually at 4601 Connecticut, which is just a block up the street. I worked there for 4 years and moved into Tacoma Park. So even now, I mean, I have a pretty, within the first year of practice, I had a pretty established practice. And so I've never really had to advertise. People keep coming. It's all word of mouth. We have more patients that we can see. I know people who know me on Instagram think I'm a pretty good farmer, but I think I'm a better doctor than I am a farmer. So the core of my practice is really about lifestyle change, and diet is one of the keys. Diet is the biggest obstacle to cure for most patients and most of the stuff that they walk in. So we have a huge nutrition component to the practice. Everybody who comes in gets put on a detox diet, which basically it's just us tricking them into eating healthier food. The basis, and the trick is if you can get people to change their diet for 3 weeks, I think 21 days is the time, right? Because we used to do a 10-day detox diet and people would do that and then they go right back to doing what they were doing before, right? And then they wouldn't suffer too many ramifications. But if you give it to them for 3 weeks and then they try to go back and eat that crap, their body lets them know like, hey, this doesn't work, right? And so diet is key. I mean, I do energy medicine. So we address the whole person. My first visit with people is a 2-hour visit, and I spend an hour for all the returns. So I spend a lot of time with people compared to most doctors. And so the 6 principles of naturopathic medicine, and you could just put in farmer for doctor, but first do no harm, which is using the least invasive and least toxic therapies, identifying and treating the causes, which is looking beyond the symptoms to try to find out what's really beneath the surface here, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, to really get to the core of what's going on for somebody. To value the healing power of nature. Like nature itself has so many healing qualities. We have a life force within us that will shift and heal the disease. And first and foremost is having people actually realize that our disease is our spirit talking to us. It's us being out of alignment with nature And our disease is a call to get ourselves back into alignment. When people are really sick, they feel isolated. I call it the ghetto. Everybody, when they feel sick, they're in their own personal ghetto. And I don't mean ghetto like black neighborhood. I mean ghetto like isolated and feeling like nothing can help you, right? And nobody can understand you. Being in a place where the world seems dangerous around you and hostile. So in the middle of our disease, that's where people tend to go. So the idea of doctor is teacher. And you can say farmer is teacher. Treating the whole person. Basically you're taking that assessment and you're coming up with a comprehensive plan. Sometimes I have to tell people, hey, I think the best thing for you is to quit your job or, get a divorce, stuff people don't want to hear. And then prevention. So once you teach people how to use their bodies in a good way, like our disease and our symptoms sometimes, that's our intuition coming through, right? And so if that symptoms come up, then it's trying to tell you something. And if you listen to what your body's trying to tell you, then you can work with it. If you try to ignore it, then you need drugs because you're overriding your own intuition. And then it's just suppressive measures, right? We just want to get rid of it so I can get along with my life without dealing with it. So the concept of interconnectedness, which is to understand and explore the microcosm in respect to the macrocosm. So again, our disease is a dynamic, multidimensional, maladaptive posture. It's us not having our energy in present time. So, I thought it was a snake, but now I know it's a rope, right? I went somewhere, I got chased by a lion, I did what it took to get away from that lion. Now I'm back in my everyday life and I'm still acting as if I'm being chased by a lion, right? So it's the as if. It's our energy not being in present time, right? Because I keep acting in the same way. My parents ignored me and I'm ignored for the rest of my life, right? And so it's these ways that we adapt to a state in a certain situation, and when that state is over, we can't continue and go back into harmony with our surroundings. So it's our energy getting stuck. So I practice with the principle that we are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. At the core of us is a non-dualistic spark of energy that has come to interact with this dualistic plane that we live in. I think our ancestors knew that, this beautiful symbol of the flower of life, which is how you weave that spark of purpose into your surroundings. And I think that they were onto something because this is, anybody have an idea? It's a cross-section of DNA. Which is amazing that the flower of life and this cross-section of DNA have a lot in common. So I think our ancestors and the ancients knew way more than we give them credit for. This is under electron microscopy. So that's a cosmos and that's a fetus. So as above, so below. So one of the medicines, part of what I do in medicine is to try to use a systems approach. So the Taoist in Chinese medicine partially comes from Taoism, right? So the Taoists have this sort of yin and yang theory, but it's really this interaction of duality, right? And so as a Chinese medicine practitioner, we view things from a systems approach. And so the beauty of that, and part of it is a frees us. So for instance, like the 5 elements, there's wood, there's fire, there's earth, metal, and water. Wood is related to the springtime, there's growth, the flavor is sour, there's a wind, there's anger and emotion, there's organs associated with it. So grains fall under the earth, which is late summer, harvest time. Grains are sweet. Sweet is nutritive. I'm not talking about sweet like sugar sweet. I'm talking about sweet as in that which sustains us. And so, and when grains are used in a healthy way, they tonify the spleen and the stomach, which are the organs that are related to transformation and I guess nutrition within the body. And so the one other thing I want to point out about this is in this map you have water, which is the winter, but there's a late fall, which is meadow. And then after late fall, in this meadow where everything in nature dies around us, we have the concept of rebirth, right? So everything comes back. And that's what we witness as farmers, but I don't think in our bigger scheme of life, we don't value rebirth, right? Everybody, the biggest fear that we all have is the fear of death. Like, death is the finality. I think farming for me has taught me to have faith through this process of rebirth, because what we need to know is always on display around us if we're willing to open ourselves up to it. So Purple Mountain Grown is sort of our extension. We were doing cooking classes as part of our things. So this detox diet, people couldn't figure out what to eat or how to cook it. Like, here's this grain that you've never had before. And like, what are we gonna do with this? So we started doing cooking classes. People would come over to our house. They'd go out in the backyard, pick the food, we'd bring them in, eat it, or prepared in a way in a small group where people could go home and actually recreate these meals on their own, right? So they were part of the cooking class, and people started asking us to actually help them in this process. And so from that, people started asking us to help grow food. Then finally, Bread for the City asked us to do a big project. And then next thing we know, we're farmers. And so it's worked out beautifully in a way. So the grain I started out with was rice. I mentioned growing up in Louisiana, we had rice at least twice a day, if not 3 times a day. Everything you eat, there's rice served with it. I don't think those folk can do that anymore, but that's how I grew up. Rice pretty much came with every meal. So we do drive-in rice in Maryland. So that was a grant that we had through the University of DC at their Beltsville Firebird Farm. It was growing dryland rice in the Mid-Atlantic, which was the USDA NIFA grant, which is a seed grant, which is to prove a concept. So we were able to like show some methodology that we developed, and so we've been doing that ever since. So our fields kind of look like this. That's a field from last year. This is a field from this year. So you see the rice in the middle there, but on each side of the rice, our other specialty is dry beans. So how many people you know can grow rice on the same plot that they're doing dry beans on, right? They're two completely, most dry beans are grown like in North Dakota and Idaho and, you know, places where it's really dry and they get 2 or 3 inches of rain for the year, right? And here we are trying to grow dry beans right next to something that's supposed to be a water needy crop, right? So, and let me point out Miss Hines back there. Hines has been a mentor. He's been a collaborator. Nothing that we do from Purple Mountain Organics as it relates to grain could have been done without Hines' help. So I want to thank him. So here's me harvesting a plot of einkorn so we're peri-urban farmers, which means we've had many plots. This is a plot, a 5 or 6 acre plot up in Sandy Spring, Maryland, right in the Piedmont. This piece of land here is really, really productive. Last year I grew, I don't know what it is in bushels, which is how farmers talk. I know pounds. So on 1 acre of land here last year, I was able to get about 4,000 pounds of hard wheat off of 1 acre of land. This is an einkorn crop that we grew. So from the rice, we were able to diversify into grains. Once you get into the grain cleaning equipment, you can diversify. This is one of my sons here, Viraga, harvesting some rice this year. So, and you can see all the toys we've been able to import, use Japanese farm equipment on a small scale. You know, I really believe the solution to the farming system that we have is we need to scale down, or we're going to expand until we collapse. And so we need to somehow, the Japanese have systems that are supported within their communities. We don't have such a thing here. So I think, you know, my risk here is taking a bet on that, right? And so, but we need to scale down, if not for sustainability, at least for our health. This is my team here, minus my daughter. If I couldn't do what I did without them. So we're in, we have, see how many products there? So we can do, I think, 7 or 8 varieties of beans, 7 or 8 varieties of rice. We do popcorn, we experiment with all kinds of stuff. I tried to grow lentils this year. That was a bust. But I did grow some barley. So this is my cousin who was wondering, hey man, if you were a real doctor, why you farming? Like, he came all the way to LA to get that picture, right? From LA to get that picture, because he couldn't figure it out. And so he was the one who told me the story about my grandparents and my parents. My father used to always just say this to me. He's like, boy, he said, I always want a piece of meat on my plate and I never want to see another potato again. And so, meaning I became vegan and he wasn't even willing to try it, right? Because he grew up in the Great Depression, right? So I was like, Dad, you know, the Great Depression ended a long time ago, like, right? So now we live in the excess of what we lacked. And so he couldn't ever get his energy into present time, but, you know, it's beautiful that my cousin could come and see. So in the end, he was like, so you really like this, don't you? I was like, yes, I love what I do. He's like, all right, I get it now. So the concept of food as medicine is key to what we do. We've been doing things to try to figure out like how to actually grow nutrient-dense food. So part of that has been moving away from this chemical way of farming, this chemical mindset of farming, into a biological mindset of farming. And so the idea is to feed the soil and bring back soil health, and then the soil will feed the plant. So I do crazy things that my buddy Heinz has always been doing, like adding rock dust and different minerals and trying to forget about nitrogen, which is so hard to do. You know, and really just taking a different approach to feeding the soil and to growing plants. So I want to just go back to grains. So the grains are nutritive. They promote elimination, quick reflexes, long memory, clear thinking. They satisfy our hunger, they provide energy and balance, they calm the nerves, they provide deep sleep. So if there's whole schools of Chinese medicine that believe disease starts in the center. They start with a corruption of the spleen and stomach. If you can keep your spleen and stomach up, then you can maintain your health. You know, when cancer patients come to me and they're going through chemotherapy, I'm like, hey, look, you got to get nuked. But if we can keep your energy up, keep your stomach going while you're doing this, then you stand a chance of survival. If you lose that, then the treatment is going to take you out as well, right? And I don't think doctors have a good gauge of when to stop, right, based upon the person's health. So part of what I do is naturopathic medicine and supporting people through treatments. I think there should only be medicine. Right? I don't think there should be natural medicine or conventional medicine. I think it should only be medicine, which is us trying to use whatever we got in our surroundings to help people get what they need and understanding what is being suppressive and what is actually dealing with the core of the disease. And I don't think that discussion is an open discussion at this point, right? We have, this is our way and you either do it or you're out. And so I'm out. And I love being out because I love my lifestyle and I love what I do with my patients. So one of the keys to whole grains is that they actually, in the colon, the fibers are fermented by the gut microbiome into short-chain fatty acids, and they reduce inflammation, they reduce insulin sensitivity, or increase insulin sensitivity, they support healthy weight and hormone balance. So the core diseases in our society are basically metabolic diseases. They start with a fatty liver disease. If you look at your complete metabolic panel and you have an ALT of over 19, you probably have metabolic disease. It's something that people walk around with diagnosed all the time. You know, once your hemoglobin A1C gets up to pre-diabetic, you probably already have metabolic, some type of fatty liver disease. So, and fatty liver disease comes from sugar in the diet, just starch, which is what we're fighting against by growing whole grains and trying to figure out how to get people to eat whole grains. So hypertension, cancer, heart disease, dementia, type 2 diabetes, that is one of the biggest killers of people in the US. Dementia is right behind it. I think we're number 2 for dementia deaths in the world, number 1 for diabetic. So infertility is a pandemic. And it may be coming partially not just from the plastics and the pollution, but also from the nutrient deficiencies in the soil. And all of the inflammatory syndromes that we have, autoimmune diseases, all types of gut problems, all of this stuff comes and is contributed to by the way we grow our food. So I'm running out of time here. Hold on. So I just want to show real quick the difference diabetes in our society and what's going on with the soil. So in Chinese medicine, diabetes is thirst, hunger, and excessive urination, which translate into lung and spleen and stomach and kidney deficiency. Spleen and stomach, the transformation of nutrients is impaired by overconsumption, and the overconsumption is happening because diabetes is overfed, undernourished. So even though we're eating and they're telling us there are calories there, they're not getting to the cellular level. So on the cellular level, we look like these little kids from the 80s in Ethiopia, right? And so because we're starving on the inside, because those calories are just empty. So I skipped through this, but this is, you know, I'm really into intermittent fasting. I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I think that we should all discover the hormone glucagon, which is the opposite hormone of insulin. Glucagon actually helps our bodies use fat. First, it helps us burn off the glycogen, which is the stored sugars, and then we start to use fat. But if we're constantly eating, most Americans never experience glucagon because they're constantly eating. So this idea of snacking and grazing through the day, you never experience glucagon. Your body never goes into repair mode if we do this. So Ray Archuleta from the NRCS, he's one of the big no-till. He says the soil is naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever. So basically he's saying the soil has diabetes. Because this is Shao-Ke syndrome from Chinese medicine, right? And so we need, and let me put nitrogen fertilizer, potassium, and phosphorus in the way that it's being used in conventional agriculture is the same as the sugar that we're putting in our mouths with all this ultra processed foods, right? It's very similar in what that's doing. So the rest of this is all about the gut microbiome. You know, there's way more, 1.3, the ratio of our cells to bacteria. There's more of bacteria than us. Most of it lives in the gut. They've even found bacteria from the gut in the brain. And there's more of our nervous system. The biggest part of our nervous system outside of the brain is in the gut. So the gut-brain interaction or connection and this way that we interact with microbiomes is our connection to our outside world. And so when you combine that with plant nutrition and how we feed the plants and how plants grow, because whether we're growing with NPK or we're using these new principles of soil remineralization and soil health, that's the difference between plants that actually contain a certain level of nutrient density and all the phytohormones that we need, because plant hormones regulate so much inside of us that we do not understand. So plant hormones and the way that they act with the gut microbiome interacts with the microbiome of our plants. You know, one of my peeves, which I know I get in trouble for this, but organic farmers, and you know, when we take all this beautiful produce out the field and they're telling us like we need to spray this down with peroxide because, you know, I'm like, we're killing the microbiome of the food. So I don't know what to do about that. But I think it's a problem, because I think we get so much from our food in terms of the microbiome. So there's so many ways that the plant microbiome interacts with the human microbiome and how similar that is. Our guts and the microbes in the gut are doing similar things to what the microbes are doing in the soil. There's a concept called rhizophagy, right? Rhizophagy shows that plants actually eat microbes. Plants can take a microbe, take it in, basically put something out there that destroys the cell wall of the microbe, take all the nutrients out of that microbe, and then take what's left of it, send it out of a hair cell, give it another cell wall, and tell it what to go and get. So the plants are farming microbes, right? And they're doing the same thing when it comes to our gut. So, you know, I'm saying a lot. I'm kind of out of time. I'm kind of hyped. But the soil solutions and what we want to do on our farms, which is decrease some of the plastic and get rid of all these antimicrobials and come to some better tillage techniques. And really, I've gone more towards biological farming and just thinking about farm in a different way versus this sort of way where we're beating down nature. One of the first projects I had here with UDC was caretaking a 2-acre orchard, which was like 500 apple trees, a couple hundred Asian pears, some blueberries. But the approach that we took, we tried all these different approaches and read all these books, and we were trying to do it organic, but we still had to, in order for us to do it in an environment where it was never meant to be done, which means that we planted an orchard in a swamp. But we had to go with this sort of us versus nature, where I was spraying all sorts of pyrethrins and copper and all these different sprays, but it was a different mindset than the one that I work with, where it's always us trying to work in harmony with nature and what our farm can give. Right? So encourage the biology and plant rhizophagy. So now I use seed inoculants, we use biological fungicides and pesticides. You know, we do seed saving, we do whatever it takes to try to grow healthier food. And so with the patients, you know, I really recommend people to avoid and eliminate processed foods. Processed food, so I say real food, people don't know what that means. It means that if it has a label, it's a problem. Right? So if you have to decipher a label, and some of the most, you know, the man who wrote Robert Lustig, he said that, you know, vegans and the people on the keto diet are like Democrats and Republicans. He's like, they both cure metabolic syndrome, but they're both can be corrupted, right? So the keto diet can definitely be used in excess and you run into problems, but with the vegans, the vegan processed food can run you straight into metabolic syndrome in the same way, right? And so this new fake meat, fake food, like, I really discourage people from all of that stuff. Like, it's it should be straight from the farmer to your table. So, all right, thank you everyone. I hope